all summer till winter is nigh. I figured up the books and heave a big sigh. I worked all year, I didn't make a thing. I got less cash now than I had last spring. You know, some folks tell us there ain't no hell. Well, they never farm, so how could they tell? When spring rolls round, I take another chance. While the fringe grows longer on these old gray pants. Give my spenders a hitch, my belt another jerk, and by heck, I am ready for another year's work.
Oh my. Wow. Beautiful. You're amazing.
Even a tractor, nobody had a tractor. That was not thought that was a hard way to farm. That was the way it was. There was no other way. Mm-hmm. And you did all your work with horses. Mm-hmm. My dad, but I could tell a bit of a story on that. There was a horseman in Pickering, and his name Pico. His name was Pico. And somehow, Dad had thought he'd like to buy some more horses, and he knew Pico. And I don't know how they made that arrangement, but they arranged it between the two of them, Dad and Mr. Pico, who was a horse buyer, to go west and buy horses, which he did quite often. But Dad went with him this time, and I can't tell you exactly how many horses they brought, but they brought them home on a boxcar, and with them from out west, Saskatchewan, they unloaded, I guess, at Pickering some. I don't know how many. And a man came with them from the west with a little, we call it a little saddle mare, that looked after the horses on the train, fed them and did whatever they had to get, let them out to get water and all that, whatever they had to do. So they took horses off at Pickering, but the rest came to Port Hope.
Wow.
And I don't know exactly how many, but those that come to Port Hope, I know that man's name too, but they wouldn't tell me. He had this little saddle mare, and he drove those horses loose from Port Hope to my dad's farm.
Come on.
Loose. And I don't know how many, I'd say 4 or 5 horses. It wouldn't be more than that. Loose.
That's
and he went from Port Hope across the lakeshore, Port Hope to Newcastle.
Yeah.
He went there to Newcastle, and then I don't know how he hit the number 2 highway. Anyway, he took them loose, and he had a little saddle mare. And the peculiar part of that is, the little saddle mare never had a bridle and a bit on her mouth. He drove her. She just had a halter on. But the shank, what we call a shank, the rider had a western saddle, and he had a rope from her halter, and he had the rope in his left hand, and the way he guided that little mare, this little saddle mare, she was a small little horse. I remember seeing her, by flipping the rope on his left hand, he'd flip it to the left if he wanted her to go that way, and flip it to the right if he wanted her to go that way. Just the end of that. But that was the way it was done in those times. We had up to 30 cattle in up to 30. We milked by hand before we got the hydro. And when the hydro come in, I well remember the day the hydro was turned on, and those silos are never outside, but this one was in our barn. The lights all came on around that silo over there, but corners we'd never even seen before.
So did you get a milking machine as soon as hydro came in?
Well, I can't answer that one, but fairly soon after, when I started farming, I went on a rented farm that my brother Alan had been there. It was a pickle family name, Fern, Pickle Fern. And we didn't have a milking machine. In fact, Dad gave me 5 cows to start a herd, and I bought some cattle, and I shipped 2 cans of milk to Silverwoods. But we milked by hand, and Eileen helped me milk by hand. Her dad, he didn't have dairy cattle, he had beef cattle. But she could milk. She helped me milk.
So did you have to teach her, or did she already know how to milk a cow?
She knew how to milk before.
Okay.
Somehow she learned them at home. Because when the beef cattle have calves, they have to be milked out somewhat sometimes too. She milked until my son Gary was close to being difficult for her to milk. And then she said, and that's when you went and bought a milking machine.
Right.
And I did. I went to Peterborough and bought a portable milker. Yeah.